everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. And today we're going to be talking about the 1998. I don't know if I'd call it a classic. I don't really know how to describe The Man in the Iron Mask. But this is a sponsored video, by the way. I don't know if you know that. You can do that for Podio Commentary. If you like what I do and you want me to talk about a movie that you like, you can just hit me up and we'll talk about it. And this is a sponsored stream by H. Bartz, who was very patient in me getting around to this movie. But I finally sat down to watch it last night. And, this is one that I saw back in the 90s when it came out. That was the last time I'd watched it. And in my mind, in my teenage brain, the movie was definitely better than watching it as a full-fledged adult. That's not to say that it's bad or anything, but this movie definitely is a bit of a mixed bag at times. Now, let me explain why that is. So, The Man in the Iron Mask is kind of an amalgamation of like the final Musketeer story, because you have the Three Musketeers, and then you have the 20 years later, which was ultimately what, like, you had the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers, the Richard Lester films back in the 1970s. And then you had the adaptation of 20 years later, which was called The Return of the Musketeers, that back in like 1988 or 1989, that was also directed by Richard Lester. That was his last movie due to a tragedy on set. And then you have the 1993 Stephen Herrick directed The Three Musketeers, which it has Kiefer and Charlie Sheen and Oliver Platt and Tim Curry, and a great cast of characters and a great cast of actors playing those characters. And then you get this one from 1998. And outside of the, I think, 2011 Paul W.S. Anderson, The Three Musketeers, I think that's really about it, unless I'm mistaken. There's been a couple French films that have come out that I hear are actually quite good, but I haven't seen them. But this movie, to me, came out 5 years post The Three Musketeers, the Disney version of The Three Musketeers. And it is, that to me, based upon how old I was when it came out, like 11, how good ultimately that movie is, how rewatchable that swashbuckling adventure is. To me, that's the pinnacle. Okay, that is the pinnacle of the adaptations of that story. And I would love to see like a return of those characters and those actors to come back into the roles all these years later to kind of pick up the mantle for the other books. But this one kind of does that. But it's in no way based off of the 1993 movie. I was mistaken. I was mistaken. There were other adaptations of the Three Musketeers that were done like in the 20s and 30s. In fact, this one is more tonally based off of the original Man in the Iron Mask, which was like a late 1920s film, I believe. So the writer and director of this film is Randall Wallace. And you might recognize that name. You might not. He came to prominence predominantly when he wrote Braveheart. And so he definitely didn't direct Braveheart. That was Gibson. But here he was given the opportunity and given the budget of about $35 million to film this adaptation that plays very fast and very loose with not only historical facts, but the adaptation process of the books as well. Like, for example, D'Artagnan, who is a real person, in this movie dies. There's spoilers. Okay, kind of like saving his son when he's killed by his other son. And in real life, the real D'Artagnan died in war. In the books, Raoul, who is Aramis's son, he ends up dying in battle, which happens here. And then Aramis basically goes home or Athos, I forget which one it was, basically goes home and dies of sorrow, like in the books. But here he goes and gets revenge. Okay. So it's kind of like, like there's things that get changed around and there's things that happen and everything else. But what cracks me up though is that, like, while it is very tonally kind of all over the place at times, it still kind of made me laugh that at the casts that they got for this, right? Like Gabriel Byrne playing D'Artagnan, who is meant to be, considerably younger than Jeremy Irons, who actually probably looks the most like Charlie Sheen because they played the same characters. And then you've got John Malkovich as is it Athos or is it Aramis? I always get their names mixed up. Anyway, like John Malkovich is like this, like soulful dad who's upset. He's gone to war. I mean, that I think they cast him because they were trying to do this like approach to it where they wanted him to be, like able to emote like a grieving father because, obviously his adopted son, Raoul, played by Peter Skarsgård, is like, it's killed. And so he's like, oh my God, like he's so upset. And then he's supposed to kind of like bond with Philippe in order to, kind of like establish that like, replacement for the son, which I mean, like they he I guess tried to not do it, but like at the end of the movie, they made it like abundantly clear that's what it was. I mean, like Leonardo DiCaprio as Philippe, as Louis the King, literally goes to him and says like, will you let me love you like a father? And will you love me like a son? Like that's the last line in the movie. Like that's the last little bit in the movie. Like they don't make it subtle about what they're trying to do or say in this thing, which is fine. Right, it gives into the ending of the film. I know I'm way ahead of myself here on this, but it's like it gives into the ending of the film where like D'Artagnan, admits that like he was the one who knocked up the queen because he's secretly in love with her and she's secretly in love with him, and they thought that they were finally going to be together, and King Louis is a complete psychopath, and that's why D'Artagnan was entirely defending him the whole time because he was like, I just want you to be the good king I know you can be. And the whole time it's a father who is like truly embarrassed of his son, but has to keep cleaning up all of his messes. While the good one, the nice, sympathetic, empathetic sweetie boy, is locked in an iron mask in the Bastille, where no one will see his face and know his true identity. But at the same time, nobody knew his true identity anyway, because when the kid was born, King Louis didn't want to have the original King Louis, the other King Louis, didn't want there to be dueling heirs because he was like, "Whoa, I've seen this happen before. It's torn apart kingdoms." So he had one of them whisked away and basically raised completely unaware that he is, royalty, that he has a bloodline. And that's actually a really interesting plot point because like the actual like man in the iron mask is a real person. No one knows who that is. You know what I mean? Like no one knows at all who the man in the iron mask was. There was this idea that, and this is like the most widely accepted idea, that it was a man named Eustace Dauger who was a valet, right? That was it. No, no prince, no duke, no kick-ass duke, right? No viscount. I don't know, like no one. It was just a valet, and this is what's widely believed to be a guy, Eustace Dauger, and that the mask itself, even though it's called the Iron Mask, was more of a namesake than really anything else. Like they believe that, like, if you actually made a mask that was made of iron, it would be way too heavy to wear. So they don't think that it was actually iron. They think that it was actually like black velvet. So okay. Like, all right, like these are thematic things, cinematic things that they've got to change in order to sell the narrative that they wanted. This is movie magic, right? 101. But I think it is interesting though. The plot is interesting, where the king has gotten so bad that there are riots in the streets. He is giving everyone rotten food. He even has his advisor murdered for giving the rotten food to people, and then says to shoot the people if they riot again. Like, that is how crazy King Louis is. He has no care for anyone. He literally has Raoul killed by sent to the front lines directly in front of where the cannons are. So then he could get with Christine like the soon-to-be betrothed to Raoul. Like, he literally has this dude murked, like, just so he could bang this lady that he claims to love. And then when she finds out, she legitimately kills herself by hanging herself and jumping off of the castle and the palace and like having her body land right in front of his room. Like, these stories don't mess around. In the original, the Three Musketeers movie, there was a character, I forget her name. She was played by Raquel Welch, and she's dumb. She's ditzy. And she just gets played the whole movie until the very end, where Milady just strangles her to death. Right? I think was that Constance? Was that her name in that movie? Anyway, like, she just ends up getting like completely. She was like, I think I called her like she was just a dummy. She was just a huge dummy, but she was harmless, and she was just completely killed as a plot device to piss off D'Artagnan, right? To get back at D'Artagnan. Characters get killed in these stories in ways that you're like, oh my God, like, that is, it's very cynical in some ways, right? But that's kind of what they were going for here. So listen, I gotta talk about the Leonardo DiCaprio part of the story, because he played dueling roles, and what was interesting about that was he played King Louis and he played Philippe, and he actually got a Golden Razzie Award for the best on-screen romance between him and himself in like the one shot that they are together. Really, well, no, it's a couple of shots there. No, that's really one shot they're together. Otherwise, it was body doubles. But then here's the thing with that. Okay. Leonardo DiCaprio was only like 24 when this movie came out, which means he would have probably been about 23 when he filmed this. He filmed Titanic, and then he filmed this one. I don't want to say back to back because I don't know, but it was he did Titanic, and then Titanic released December of 1997, literally destroyed the world at the box office. This movie was released March of 1998, March 13th, 1998. Just less than 3 months after Titanic came out. And when it opened at the box office, it opened to number 2. And the number 1 movie, are you guessing what it is? Fucking Titanic. So Leo had the number 1 and number 2 movies at the box office. Leo-Mania was real, and I think that's probably what propelled this movie to making $57 million domestic, and then also $126 million worldwide, or sorry, international, for a $183 million worldwide gross, which seems so small in comparison now. I mean, if you really look at like box office now, that would be seen as a flop. But back in 1998, a $35 million film grossing 5 times its budget is actually seen as really profitable, right? Not including marketing and anything else, but that's also a tax write-off for those of you who don't know how Hollywood works when you talk about the budget. The tax write-offs are great. The tax incentives are great. We don't get all that information because we don't have access to those books, nor do we have access to anything that Hollywood accounting does, which is, usually the problems. So, like, there was a lot there in this movie that had a lot going for it. I want to say that. As I was watching it last night, again, I'm trying to like get into it. I was having a little bit of trouble getting into the movie because like there's just like for me, the 1993 Musketeers film is the pinnacle, as I mentioned. But as I'm watching this, it's like there's a lot of scenes that just feel like they really stretched this 2 hours and 12 minutes. It didn't need to be 2 hours and 12 minutes. You probably could have had a lean 1 hour, 45 minutes and really made it work. It really streamlined the adventure. I think if you're going to go swashbuckling, you almost have to approach it like you would a pulp story. You know what I mean? Like the pulp stories are quick, they're fast, they get you in, they get you out. And that's kind of what you have to do here. Because unless you're going to like romanticize the settings, which is something that Randall Wallace didn't really do in this film. He actually, that was kind of one of the things it was called out for, was he didn't romanticize it enough. Even if you go back to the 93 film, it was very romanticized. The solemn moments with Kiefer Sutherland talking about, like, Milady de Winter and his marriage to her, and the other little moments here, little moments there, the Tim Curry over the top bad guy, right? As the Cardinal. And then you've got, Michael Wincott as Rochefort, and he's kind of like chewing the scenery. There was a sense of romance in the way that they shot that movie. There was a sense of adventure, of scale, right? That when you were watching this movie, they made it feel bigger than what it was. This movie did not really do that, despite trying to do it. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that the majority of the movie was either spent at a cottage, like at I guess an estate in the country, or in enclosed environments like the palace or the Bastille. And they made it feel bigger by having all of these secret passages play like a main part. So at least it was a way to kind of like, I don't want to say make it maybe bigger, but they made it feel like, that we didn't have to go to the main rooms. We didn't have to see everything because people could serpentine through these secret passages and everything else. And then the downside, though, is that, like, you could tell what was a set and you could tell what was real. And they did a mixture of all of that. They did a mixture of, like, shooting out at some of the actual, like, real world locations. So they shot, like, for 5 weeks at the Chateau de Vaux-le-Vicomte. Oh, God damn it. I can't even pronounce that. As King Louis Palace and Royal Gardens. The guy who owns that particular establishment, his name is Nicholas Fouquet. He was actually, was arrested. What's it? Okay, no, he was the owner, right? Sorry, its owner, the original owner. Sorry, I'm misreading my notes here. The original owner was arrested by the real D'Artagnan back in 1661 after throwing a grand party for the king. Just to go to show you, like, how kind of crazy things are in France and maybe how linear the family trees are. But anyway, it's like they shot there. They went to a bunch of different places around France to kind of make it look more real. And, like, some of those scenes worked out real well, but then they would just go into these sets. And I feel like that kind of maybe hurt things a little bit, just when you're trying to, like, because you could see that they're sets. Like, at one point, like, Gérard Depardieu fights a guy and he throws him into a wall, and you literally see the head bounce off of the rubber or the foam that was designed to be the rock. You see it bounce, you see it, and so it's like, okay, like, those are little things. Those are nitpicks. But it's just those little things kind of picked up as time went on. But I do want to point out things I enjoyed. There's a lot that I enjoyed. I liked the movie quite a bit. It was just kind of like, it was hard to kind of get past, like, the way John Malkovich portrayed the character is way different than Oliver Reed portraying the character back in the 70s films and even the late 80s movie, as well as even Kiefer Sutherland portraying the character back in 1993. And you're like, okay, like, it's just, again, like, this is a man who's broken, it seems like, and that's something that Malkovich can do well, but you just don't really feel it, like Gérard Depardieu as Porthos. Yeah, no, it works because the whole time the dude's just horny. Like, he's just completely horny. There's a whole conversation in the beginning of the movie about how, like, what is better in life than having a nipple between your lips. You know what I mean? And, like, there's, like, tons of comments about boobs and, like, having sex with prostitutes and everything else. And, like, and that's Porthos, right? I mean, not the Disney version, not the Oliver Platt version of it, but you can kind of see, like, there's a lot there. And, like, the larger than life kind of characterization that Gérard Depardieu brought to it. And then, Gabriel Byrne was just kind of playing this, I don't know, like, dude with the stick up his ass the whole time. And I get that he's a guy bound by duty, bound by honor, bound by loyalty, especially to his son once you find out more. And it's just kind of like that dynamic. It really makes you question the dynamic of these characters going back to the original book. Now, I haven't read the original book, but it feels like for these guys who have been, like, brothers for 20 years, 30 years at this point, there would have been a little bit more like understanding. There would have been a little bit more trust. But D'Artagnan is largely the antagonist of the movie until he isn't. Like, we all knew that King Louis was the bad guy, and DiCaprio played him quite well. And Philippe was the good guy, and DiCaprio played him quite well. Like, you can tell the subtle differences between the two. When I'm watching the movie, I at no point in time thought to myself that which one is which. I don't know. No, you can tell directly based upon how DiCaprio carries himself between both portrayals, and it works out quite well for him. The only thing I hated, and this is a nitpick, I hated the wig. He has this long flowing wig. It just did not look good. But then again, all those guys had long hair. Like, all of them had long hair. Oh, okay, fine. You know, this is what, 1600s France? You know, I get it. Okay. like I totally get it. All right, fine. You know, and again, it's just the way that this movie kind of plays out is the whole point of like switching out the king for his brother, who's his identical twin, who is not a monster, is actually a really great story. It is full of mystery. It is full of intrigue. There's even a whole thing about that too, where Porthos is like, he has like this downer moment where he's trying to like, you know, he's kind of realizing he's not really useful, you know, and I think it was Aramis, the Jeremy Irons is all like, you know, like, what more do you want? We have danger. We have intrigue. We have all of these things, you know, and he's like, you're surrounded by beauty and all this. And he's just like, yeah, but I got kidney stones and I have no use. And like basically saying like, my dick don't work, you know, and like, it got to be a little bit like, as part of that subplot, like I was trying to really figure out like what was going on with him. I mean, I get the progression of feeling old and useless and wanting to feel helpful and wanting to be of service. I get all that. But it felt kind of mangled at times. And I think the biggest problem here, right? I said this could be streamlined into about an hour and 45, right? Maybe 2 hours if you cut, you know, just trim the fat a little bit. Or this would have been an interesting prestige cable show. A limited series on HBO Max or Netflix that then lays out everything, right? Allows it all to breathe, allows the intrigue to grow, allows the characters to grow, allows for the D'Artagnan change, allows for the breathing of, you know, the reveal that he is, you know, like the father of these two, the love between him and the queen that was forbidden. Like, all of these things could have been really extrapolated into prestige television rather than trying to tell it in 2 hours and 12 minutes, right? You either have the version of the film that is chopped down, that is streamlined, that is pulpy, that is swashbuckling, or you have the longer, maybe 8 to 10 episodes that can really let everything breathe and get fleshed out. This is always the problem with adaptations, because you are either hitting the high notes or you've got to let the whole thing play out, because this is what the fans are going to want. Now, look, again, a lot of people, you know, the critics weren't the biggest fans of this movie. They weren't, right? But Cinema Score at the time, the audience came back and said B+, which now we view B+ as not good, which is so weird. Our viewing of movies now is so different than they were, you know, nearly 30 years ago. But Metacritic gave it a generally favorable 6.5 out of 10. And a lot of people said the cast was a magical. And one of the things my notes here says also that the movie was very entertaining, which it was. I think when you get to the back half of the movie, when you get to like the back third of the film, when the climax starts to take off, when everything starts to take off and they start, you know, now they're like, they've made the attempt to switch out the king. It doesn't work. All is lost moment. Philippe is back in the Bastille with the mask on. Louis got the key. They're hunted down, you know, and then D'Artagnan is like, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to get in there and get out. Right. And like, then D'Artagnan kind of comes to his senses, realizing that his own son is a monster, you know, but we don't know that at that time. Like, at that point, it starts to really pick up. But I think the biggest problem, if you compare, let's say, the 93 movie to this, is that, like, again, the character interactions were like not as fun as they were in the first movie. Now, granted, the settings are entirely different. The setup is entirely different, right? The rules of engagement have changed. Now, the Musketeers aren't on the run from the Cardinal. They're on the run from their own people. And that ends up being a big problem, because in the first movie, or if you are the first story, aren't like the Musketeers are disbanded, because the Cardinal wants to control the king. Now the Cardinal's gone. The king is gone. His son is in control, and his son is basically fucking Caligula. So everything changes. So, again, it's a movie that is very much a product of its time. It is it's a flawed but fun movie that really does kind of, I guess you could say, act as more of a time capsule of the late 90s for, like, not only the budget, but the casting, the scope and scale of it, and everything else. But it does, it plays fast and loose. And, that can be a little bit, a little bit annoying for certain people who enjoy it well enough, But I liked it. I don't know. I'll be honest with you guys. I don't know if I would watch it again in the next 25 years, right? It's not one I'm going to want to go back to. It's one that I recommend if you're looking for, like, it's an easy watch, a bit frustrating at times. But if you want to go into it and you want to, like, just kind of see what another take on the Musketeers was, like, past the original films, past the films from the 20s and the 30s, past the 1993 movie, everything else. At least I should say the more modern adaptations, and I will say that with the 70s films. Then you can see this one and see what they're going for. But the other downside to that is that there's a whole bunch of what if, right? Like, what if it was Kiefer instead of John Malkovich? What if it was that cast doing that? What if it was, written and directed by somebody who, like, okay, written is fine, but directed by someone who better understood the assignment for swashbuckling films? Because if I recall, Randall Wallace went on to, a couple years later, write and direct We Were Soldiers, which was Mel Gibson and that Vietnam movie. And I don't remember that being very good outside of the napalm scene, because that napalm scene was, like, insane. So I do feel that in some aspects, this particular film runs into those problems where it's like, you have a good story, you just needed a better person at the helm. But when, your previous screenplay wins a ton of awards and everything else, Hollywood does give vanity projects. And at the end of the day, this is a vanity project that is completely surrounded by the what if, rather than the, wow, that was good. And I feel like there are elements of this that are always going to be fun. DiCaprio was great. The casting was good. The acting was good. The directing, the pacing was probably the biggest problem. Like, it would have been interesting if they would have got Richard Lester to come out and tackle this movie, or Stephen Herrick to come out and do this movie. Again, those are wishful thinking what ifs on my part, but I am curious to know what you guys think about this movie. Be sure to let me know down in the comment section what you all think. And thank you again to HBarts for sponsoring this episode. I will talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podio Commentary, and peace out.